Well, hello everyone. Welcome to episode number 2 of Longevanity, where we explore health and wellness to try to help everybody live your best life. So, thank you for joining us today. This is our second episode ever. So, this is definitely a live program. So, we are going to try to figure this all out, the technology side with me, as we try to do a little lunch and learn. So today is what I want to call a nuts and bolts kind of day. So I'd like to talk a little bit today over lunch around concepts around hormone replacement and look at how that impacts on overall health and wellness. So for starters today, one of the questions I commonly get asked is just a little bit about particularly what we consider the sex hormones. So for women, that would be estrogen and progesterone. For men, testosterone. Usually that's where conversations start. So I want to kind of zoom out a little bit here, literally and figuratively. And I want to take a look at big picture. So, although that is usually the primary question, bringing somebody into the doctor's office or to our clinic to chat about, it's really important to understand the hierarchy of hormones. So, maybe we'll call today's episode Hormonal Hierarchy. So, I want to begin by saying hormones are messengers in your body. They communicate all over, and we have receptors for these little messengers everywhere. And again, because people's interests usually are around the sex hormones, specifically, let's just talk sex hormones for a second before we completely zoom out and then come back to it. So, sex hormone receptors for estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, something called DHEA, which we'll explore. They're everywhere in your body. They're not just on the sexual organs, they're everywhere. They're in your brain, they're in your skin, they're in your joints, your muscles, your bone, all over the place. So they're not isolated specifically to those organs, and they serve a whole host of functions. So basically, what we really want to talk about a little bit is the impact of all the other hormones as they interrelate with the sex hormones. Because to just go gunning after the sex hormones for hormone related issues sometimes leaves us at a little bit of a loss. You could get frustrated with that, or maybe you've even experienced this yourself. If you have, come chime in live on this. I'm going to try to see if I can figure out how to take questions. This is, again, second episode, so I'm on a bit of a learning curve here too. But if you're actually able to message me from where you're at, please send me your questions or share a little if you're comfortable with what you experienced if you just went direct to hormone. So people who directly take hormones sometimes can have symptoms or considerations where they initially feel better and then they don't feel as well anymore. So, for example, things were helping, but then they started to get some side effects from the hormones, which may or may not have been a game ender for them, where they have stopped the hormones or they've gone back for more help. But what we need to consider is that the end hormones, again, are what I would call level 3 in the hierarchical order. So let's talk about that. Let's zoom out. So one of the things we want to consider when we're looking to try to optimize hormone function and optimize really how you feel, that's actually the key thing here. It's not about the number or the hormone, it's about the person and how you feel after treatment, is we really want to try to make everything in your body work together beautifully and function efficiently for best overall sense of well-being. So we have to start with the apex hormone. And one of the apical hormones, I would call them, would be cortisol. So what do we know about cortisol? Cortisol is really important because it's a primary fight or flight hormone. As human beings have evolved like many other creatures, we've been around for thousands of years and we were not at the apex that we are on now. Initially, we could be considered prey. So we would have to have fight or flight responses in order to survive our predator, not get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, and be able to live a full enough life that we could reproduce, have offspring, raise them, and keep the species going. So this is how we've evolved from an evolutionary point of view. So cortisol is an important fight or flight hormone. Cortisol and our sympathetic nervous system, that's our really fast acting adrenaline and noradrenaline, that and cortisol puts our bodies in a physical state where we can best flee from a predator. So cortisol is a slower stress hormone than adrenaline. But what it does is it helps to bump up our blood sugar so that, again, our muscles can get sugar to them or glucose to them so that they can function and we can run away from the saber-toothed tiger. What was supposed to happen and what happened for thousands of centuries while we were evolving is that after the predator disappeared or the stress resolved itself, if we survived, well, then our cortisol levels would drop back down and we would go back down to a normal state. When we were trying to survive, flee from a predator or get away, it wasn't really the time to be making babies or healing or doing other things or digesting our food, for example. So a lot of those other systems would be somewhat suppressed so that all the energy could be conserved and pushed forward into, again, creating a survival situation for us. So when we're under stress now, our saber-toothed tigers are text messages or emails from work or conflict or, or road rage or these other things that tend to come into our lives. Family stress, being, again, a middle-aged adult where you've got parents who are not doing well and have a lot of health issues and you've got tons of worries. You've got adult-ish kind of kids who still need you and there's lots of stress on you and things to worry about. These are our saber-toothed tigers of today. And unlike the predator-prey role where it was there transient and then gone after you survived, the attack you were under, today's predators, today's stressors, they linger. They don't go away. So cortisol levels can stay quite elevated. And with that, we can see interference with how our other hormonal systems work. So in order to best help with what most people come in asking about, estrogen, progesterone, and other, we have to step back and try to help get the cortisol into its optimal level where it keeps us healthy and strong, but where it's not causing other problems. Cortisol, if it's really high, can actually cause some hot flashes too. So not all things that hot flash are necessarily estrogen loss. It can be cortisol, it can be thyroid. So that's my little segue into the thyroid. So I would say in the second seat in our hierarchy would be thyroid issues. So thyroid is a little gland in your neck, and it's kind of like the body's thermostat. It runs a lot of the metabolic functions, and thyroid issues, the thyroid can be underactive and everything kind of slows down. You don't have as much energy, sleeping, skin's dry, you get constipated, a whole host of other things that can happen. Or the thyroid can get all jacked up, and that is too much of a good thing. And then you're wired, and you can have palpitations and anxiety and all sorts of other issues too. So the thyroid is what I call a Goldilocks hormone. Actually, many of the hormones are like Goldilocks and the three bears. You need your porridge to be right. Not too hot, not too cold. In this case, not too high, not too low. So again, we have to look at and consider thyroid. Now, thyroid can also be messed with a little bit with immune issues. So sometimes under stress with fluctuating cortisol issues, you can end up with some impairment of your immune system. And unfortunately, some people end up making little antibodies to their thyroid. And the antibodies actually attack the thyroid gland and interfere with function. And quite interestingly, you might initially intuitively think, well, that would sort of smoke the thyroid and make you underactive. Well, it can do that. Also, interestingly, it can really irritate the thyroid and make you super overactive as well. So antibodies can kind of drive you in either direction. So you can get these thyroid antibodies and you can end up with thyroid problems. So an example of a condition where we have thyroid antibodies where you become overactive, well, that would be Graves' disease. Or on the flip side, if your thyroid gets attacked and your thyroid's now really underactive, that's an example of that would be Hashimoto's. And so those are both autoimmune conditions involving the production of antibodies over time where you start to, unfortunately, attack your own thyroid. So we want to look at that and address that because, again, the thyroid hormone, all of these things interact with each other, can have some impact on how efficiently your other hormones, your sex hormones, again, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, DHEA, how they all work with your whole system. So that is, again, a really important balancing act. And again, there are certain things in our environment that can aggravate that as well as help to ameliorate that. So we need to look at the whole picture. From there, finally, we get to usually what people are here asking about, which is the sex hormones proper. So, with those, again, for women, frequently we think of, well, estrogen and testosterone. And for men, we think of testosterone. Well, the story is more complicated than that. So, both genders make all the hormones. So, women make, of course, estrogen and progesterone, but we also make testosterone and we make something called DHEA. And this, again, is a delicate balance. It's not just about the the absolute amount, how much you have or don't have, but it's also the amounts you have all relevant to each other. Things have to be in balance. Too much is not good, neither is too little. And yeah, ladies, you do make testosterone. It's interesting that, again, the hormones, a lot of these hormones are actually all originally derived from cholesterol. So cholesterol isn't all bad. Again, kind of going back to this Goldilocks analogy, it's all about balance. It's everything in moderation. The human body is probably the most highly sophisticated orchestra you could ever imagine. And if you think about an orchestra as an analogy, I kind of like it as an analogy because if the instruments aren't playing together, you get a lot of noise. It's just noise. But when they all play their part at the right time in the right way, it makes beautiful music. The same holds true with the human body. We have all these different factors, these different hormones. If they don't work well together, you don't feel well, and it's just noise and poor, inefficient function that can result in a lot of symptoms. So again, because these receptors are everywhere, this is why sometimes people get symptoms that are cognitive. So example, brain fog or anxiety or disturbed sleep and insomnia, again, can be related to some of these hormones not being in balance or at the right levels, because again, they are involved and there are receptors in your brain. There are receptors in your bone, your muscle. You're having changes in body constitution. You notice that your midsection is getting, thicker and your muscle mass is disappearing. You're going to the gym and eating well. Well, what is this? Again, things aren't being messaged or stimulated correctly. So it's again about the balance. And so going back to cholesterol, our body takes cholesterol. So you need some, the right amount. And then from cholesterol, our body makes a whole litany of different hormones and they go through different steps and some of them can slide back and forth with enzymes from one form to another. Some, it's just one way directional sort of changes or morphing. So for example, women, you ladies out there, all of your estrogen is derived from testosterone. So it kind of comes through that pathway. So testosterone is a precursor to estrogen. And estrogen, this transition can be made in multiple places. So in a premenopausal woman, a lot of the estrogen synthesis is indeed in the ovary. After menopause, your ovaries kind of forego that job, but other tissues in your body take it over. So for example, fat cells in your body have a lot of the little enzyme needed to convert precursor hormone over to estrogen. So you still make estrogen, but just not in the same amount and perhaps not in balance anymore, which is where a little pharmaceutical help can kind of come in a bit to help out. So yes, women absolutely do have testosterone. We usually have a circulating amount, about a tenth of what the guys do, but it's there and it's there for a purpose. So what role is this in women? Well, for us, we use testosterone for mental energy, mental clarity, for a little bit of that confidence. Sometimes if testosterone's really low, women can feel really emotionally labile. You watch some silly meme on social media or a sappy commercial and you're like bawling your eyes out. Well, again, maybe it's because you're a little low in testosterone. So again, we have receptors in our brain and it serves a purpose. So yes, it should be there. The other things that testosterone do in the right amount, well, they help to keep our bone mass up. That in conjunction with estrogen and progesterone, they all have a part to play. Certainly testosterone helps to maintain some healthy muscle mass, which again is very important in warding off frailty later in life. So again, so many roles that we have to consider when we're looking at testosterone, and we need it in balance. Now, certainly, if our testosterone is way too high, again, getting back to this whole theory of balance, then we can have problems as well. You can get hair loss on your scalp. You can get facial hair, acne, oily skin, and progressively more so masculinizing features. So everything has to be in balance, everything in moderation. Otherwise, we just have noise and problems. So that is one of the hormones we have to consider for women as well. Certainly, women may have heard about testosterone for libido, but it has all those other factors as well as some metabolic impacts too, as far as weight, etc. The other hormone that we have that doesn't get a lot of press is something called DHEA. And this is it's in the androgen category, which is a category, again, we usually assign testosterone or masculinizing hormones, although it's not nearly so masculinizing, but its main role, again, is in immune health, amongst other things. And so it has a relationship. It's mostly produced in women in the adrenal glands. And when we're under stress, it helps initially to try to moderate some of the cortisol. Again, it's a balancing type of hormone. If we have really profound stress for a really long time, we can actually lose out on a whole lot of our adrenal glands' ability to produce adequate amounts of DHEA, and then we can start to have some immune issues. So again, all of these hormones are quite important, and they all interrelate with each other. So again, balance is really super important. Changing gears here and talking about the guys. Men are more than just testosterone. Men also have estrogen, and they have progesterone as well, and also DHEA. Different proportions than women. So again, balance is really important. So again, what are some of the interesting things that some of these other things do? Well, progesterone in both genders actually can be very helpful for brain. It's very calming. It helps with sleep quality in men and women. It also helps in men to protect the prostate, so it can be very helpful there. Pardon me. So again, we like to see progesterone present. Estrogen has some cognitive benefits for men. So we want it, but we don't want it in excess either. So in as much as we don't want too much testosterone for the women, because it can produce hair loss, acne, facial hair. In men, we don't want too much estrogen because they can get breast development. Sorry, live video. So all of these things are super important, have to be looked at together. Sorry about that. Yeah, we're live. So anyways, this is how our little orchestra plays together. So I'm just going to grab a little drink here, folks. Pardon me. There, we'll try a little bit again and see if that helps. So these are some of the complex relationships between these hormones, and we need to always be considering them and monitoring them. One of the other things that comes up sometimes when we are looking at hormones or hormone management is some of the concerns patients come with when they're told everything is normal and they feel anything but normal. One of the things I just want to point out that is a weakness in conventional healthcare is how conventional healthcare looks at hormones. Right now, there are very limited tools. We do some blood work sometimes. So in men's health, if we were prescribing testosterone, it is expected that you would be following with testosterone levels, amongst other things. In women's health, if you're prescribing estrogen, the standard of care is not measuring hormone levels in straightforward situations. In fact, we're told to treat clinically. And so the problem is, as healthcare providers, we're slowly evolving more into a test, don't guess, and step outside of just clinically treating, which is where we look at symptoms and we do symptom-based treatment without looking at levels. But this is still the conventional way of looking at it. When you do get blood work done, which again is not normally what is considered conventional care for routine care, the concept of normal range versus optimal range, and this is where conventional medicine, traditional medicine, versus functional medicine, which is a little bit more root cause medicine, have a bit of controversy. So conventional medicine defines normal based on two standard deviations from the mean. What does that mean? If you took, 100 people, the results, and measured their levels, the results from those 100 people would then be analyzed. The bottom 2.5 people's numbers would be considered abnormal low, and the top 2.5 people's numbers would be considered high. Everybody else's would be considered normal. What does that mean to you? Well, if you were somebody, let's say, who was in the top 80% of the pack, and something happened with your health, body changes, and you're now in the bottom 5%, you will be normal, told you're normal, but you don't feel the same. Your body's not functioning the same, and that's not normal for you. So this is where sometimes people feel a little bit frustrated or gaslit by healthcare because they go for testing. And if they can get to testing, which again, sometimes with some situations, based on how a lot of us were trained, is difficult to get access to it. But if you do, it is not unusual to hear back, well, your results are normal. I'm sorry, I don't find anything here. So this is where the difference is with functional medicine. In functional medicine, there's the concept of optimal and personalized. So in functional medicine, optimal would be, again, if we were in a range where we wanted, where high was better and low was maybe not as functioning, we'd probably want you in the top quartile, at the top 75th percent. Conversely, if it was a measurement we did where we liked things low, we'd probably want you in the bottom quartile, the bottom 25%, to expect you to feel the best. And then from there, continue to follow and actually adjust according to how you felt, sort of balancing where you were statistically amongst these ranges versus how you feel. So it's a little bit of a different concept. So normal labs might not actually be normal for you. So again, this is something we want to look at as well. So it's complicated, basically. And it's not a one-size-fits-all phenomena. Today, we didn't even get a chance to explore what happens to these hormones after they're utilized. That's a whole other discussion for another day. But today, that's what I really wanted to cover. So the key takeaways from today are hormones work together in balance, in tandem with other hormones. And the balance and the working together part is really important. The best analogy to think of it is like an orchestra where everything has to play together at the right time, at the right volume, in the right way. It is important to consider the relationship of the hormones, particularly with what I would call higher level hormones impacting on lower level hormones responses. The hierarchy of hormones. We have to consider our stress. Another conversation for another day is how to try to improve our cortisol situation, because that will overall improve our overall health and how we feel. Then the next one that we have to consider is thyroid. And then ultimately, we need to look at those sex hormones and all of them, the ones that affect us in both genders, all four: estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA. So they all work together. So that's our little hormone harmony. If you'd like to learn more about this, I have a couple of places where you can visit to get a bit more information. So up on the screen right now, I have a little QR code, and this is our website. So if you scan that QR code just down here at the bottom, you can go directly to our website. The other thing is, if you liked our talk today and are interested in learning more about this subject and other subjects, I would encourage you to follow us. So this is the link to our podcast. So we'll be doing this our Wednesday lunch hours. So we'll be here Wednesdays between 12:15 and 12:45, covering a host of different topics, everything from, I guess I would call it living your best life, anti-aging from the inside out. So sometimes we'll be focusing more on internal health, preventative health things that ultimately lead to better quality of life, as well as, looking great for as long as you can, hanging on to that youth. all the way through to taking questions and trying to cover what's relevant and what's pertinent. And then we're also going to be having a live educational event coming up. Hopefully, you can join us. This is going to be live for those of you who are local, and we will be streaming as well. This is our Thrive Summit. So, this is going to be Wednesday night, October the 22nd, and we hope you can join us. It'll be in Aurora. But if you're remote to us or you just can't get there, then we'll also be live streaming. So thank you again for watching. We hope you'll subscribe and follow, and we'll see you next week. Send me your questions if you have topics you want me to cover. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.